So, good evening, everybody. I am Jacopo Moscatelli, and today I will be the chair educator for this panel. I ask my colleague to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name's Amanda Forster, and I'll be one of the judges today.
And I am Riccardo Rio. I am also one of the judges.
Amanda and Riccardo. So, this evening we are here for the third round of the English Italian Championship for the high school. Today are facing for the proposition team the Mosè Bianchi and for the opposition the Majo speaking corner. Now I ask to the proposition team to introduce themselves with their position, specifying who will have the reply speech.
I'm Lorenzo Gaviraghi and I will be the first speaker prop.
Thank you.
I am Sofia Goshen and I will be the second speaker prop.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Giada Gaviras, third speaker from side proposition.
Okay, perfect. Now for the opposition team, I ask you the same thing, so to introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Elisabetta Karinchuk, first speaker and reply speech.
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Leonardo Mario and I'll be the second speaker.
Okay. The third one, I miss it. No, Nicolo, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be third opposition speaker.
Okay, perfect. So, as you know, the topic for tonight is prepared, and it is: this house would require all foods already on the market to undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel foods. There is an info slide. Novel foods refers to food introduced in Europe from May 15, 1997, whose marketing is currently regulated by Regulation EU 1215/2283. So I think that we are all ready to hear you, and I give the speech to the fourth speaker of the proposition team. As you want.
Okay. Okay, everyone's ready? Okay, so I'll start my speech in 1, 2, 3. So in this debate, as the proposition side, we will prove you that applying the novel food pre-market safety assessment to all foods currently on the market leads to a greater protection of public health and to a better functioning, more trustworthy and a fair food market compared to the current system. But how does it work for novel foods? Foods not consumed in the EU before 15 May 1997 must undergo mandatory pre-market authorization, centralized risk assessment, and the submission of a safety dossier which assesses all of the components, the production process, and other key factors. All of this before they are allowed to be put on the European market. However, novel food regulations can be also very efficient, for example, for foods that have been safely consumed for 25 plus years elsewhere. So the safety dossier, so the more lengthy part of the process, is not requested. And it's enough to provide proof of the product composition and history. And foods already on the EU market instead are not required to undergo any assessment. And self-compliance with the regulations is expected, and controls are applied if the products are reported by consumers. So crucially, both novel foods and non-novel foods must ultimately be safe under EU law, and the health standard is identical. So this means that European food producers should have all of the information on their products that is required for novel food checkups, and theoretically, all foods on the market should comply with regulations, so the assessment should not be an issue. And finally, the key difference between novel foods and foods already on the market is that the first are controlled before they are sold to consumers, and the latter are supposed to respect regulations without any enforcement mechanism. This creates a regulatory inconsistency because a food eaten for 25 years outside the EU must prove safety before sale, while a food sold for decades inside the EU may never be reassessed, even though the exposure patterns change, the processing changes, and the new scientific evidence emerges. So this is the gap the motion closes. Moving on to our model, we will have all foods already on the market go through novel food assessment. In most cases, we would extend the 25 plus years option for assessment, as it is the one that takes less time and that is more efficient. So we will give precedence to high-risk foods such as infant foods or food staples like pasta, olive oil, bread, etc. Last thing on our model, a project like this requires funding. So we would propose a system of fees that have to be paid when applying for an assessment, and the fees would be proportional to the size of the company. So large multinationals would pay a higher fee, while small and medium enterprises would pay a lower fee. So mind you that this is the system in place for the majority of the controls that European companies are subject to, and it has specifically been studied to allow fair competition for small and medium enterprises. Just to mention a few, this is the system of pharmaceuticals, chemical regulations, novel foods, food additives controls, and medical devices. They all pay the scalable fee to allow for an efficient system, so it is realistic. Why the status quo is structurally unsafe? For two main reasons. The first one, enforcement happens after harm has scaled. So detection occurs after products are widely distributed across the EU market. And this means that health exposure has already occurred. Recalls are costly and incomplete, and trust damage is irreversible. Second motivation, the current cost-benefit analysis incentivizes wrongful compliance. So right now, the benefits when not complying with the regulations are lower costs because fewer tests and less documentation reduce expenses, and because cutting costs of production amplifies profit margins. And B, faster market access, which allows them to sell earlier and gain a competitive advantage. The cost is marginal because controls are rare, and even when there are sanctions or fines, these can be absorbed by multinationals or even delayed because the system is low and very bureaucratic. So in competitive, low-margin food markets, even small cost savings can determine survival. So this makes accepting higher safety risk a rational business decision. So this means that in the status quo, it is literally incentivized not to comply with the regulations. So moving on to our first argument, the status quo puts consumer safety at risk. So the absence of a mandatory pre-market safety assessment for foods already on the market creates systemic and predictable risk to consumer health. Moving on to our reasoning, most mass-consumed foods are produced and distributed by large multinational companies. So these actors operate complex cross-border supply chains. They prioritize speed and cost efficiency, and they can absorb recalls, fines, and reputational damage. So this makes risk-taking economically viable because the cost of non-compliance is often lower than the benefit of cutting corners. As a result, unsafe or non-compliant products can reach millions of consumers before detection. Even for an empirical evidence, large-scale safety failures under the status quo. And there are a lot of examples. First example, the horse meat scandal of 2013. Beef products were sold across the EU that were found to contain undeclared horse meat. So this involved falsified supply chain records, multiple multinational intermediaries, and EU-wide distribution before detection. So beyond fraud, this created direct safety risks because horse meat can contain also veterinary drug residues not authorized for human consumption. And this proves that post-market controls detect problems after mass exposure, but not before. moving on to a second example, the egg contamination with fipronil of 2017. So eggs across multiple EU countries were contaminated with fipronil, an insecticide banned in food-producing animals. And so millions of eggs were withdrawn only after they had entered the food chain. And the contamination originated in the EU industrial egg production and spread rapidly through cross-border trade. Moving on to our third and last example, non-compliant additives in seafood, so like the benzoic acid in squid. Investigations found the use of unauthorized preservatives such as benzoic acid in seafood like squid to extend their life and reduce waste. So consumers have no way of knowing what they are ingesting. This proves that even when the harm is not immediately acute, consumers are exposed to unknown substances and hidden risks. Why this is a structural problem? Because in all the three cases that we have shown you, products were legally on the market. No pre-market safety assessment was required, and the intervention happened only after the distribution. So the system assumes compliance and reacts to failure, but it does not prevent it. So why proposition fixes this with his model? Because a requiring level pre-market safety assessment forces safety verification before scale, makes cutting corners unprofitable, blocks unsafe or unknown products before consumers are exposed. And with that, I rest my case.
Thank you. Your speech lasts 8 minutes and 10 seconds.
Can I start?
I don't see Ricardo. Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I say that you can start as you want.
Three, two, one. Okay. Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to discuss why we are absolutely against this motion, and I'm going to start by rebutting everything that the first speaker said. So, first of all, in their model, they said that it would not be an issue for the producers to have all the data that it's required to do the UE tests. That is not correct. Yes, multinational will already have the data, while small producers or medium producers will not have every test, like, for example, toxicological studies and so on. So that's already an issue. Then they said that this would be important to have this model, because when we have a scientific progression, we don't change our diet, and we don't change. No, thank you. That is not correct. In fact, if we have new information regarding a food, we will absolutely study it more and be aware of that. Then let's move on. And they said that in the status quo, that the health of the consumers is damaged in our status quo. Like, we have hundreds of cases of people dying just because they ate apple because it wasn't checked by the UE. That is not correct. No, thank you. That is absolutely not correct. They both no data, no percentage that show how many people were in danger because of that. Then they said that they would prioritize production rather than quality, and they said that foods are unsafe, and they brought some examples. Just to clarify, all the examples they brought were from 10 years or so on, so that's already we can see how the status quo changed in 10 years, because it's not 2013 anymore.
Right.
No, thank you. Then they said that they want to prevent this problem. Well, they are not preventing it. They are just making sure that the foods that are now on the market are safe in a very problematic way, in a very ridiculous way, but I'm going to explain that later. We are going to prevent this issue by research, by scientific research, and not by putting a lot of money into useless tests. Now I'm going to start our team line. So can you imagine a world where all of the foods undergo the safety control novel foods undergo? Which producers could have the money and the capacity to wait for months before selling their products? Which producer could wait for months before they gain money to get some money back after all the loss of all the pay loss they had? This is a situation only a very few huge corporations could stand, obviously, and so now we can see how the picture is getting clearer, that the situation will drastically harm both the consumers and the economy. And we are going to show this with our three arguments. First of all, our first argument says that this situation would cause a monopoly of the food market, which leads us to our second argument, which says that these controls will raise the price of food and reduce the choice of everyone of us in the market. Finally, the third argument says that it's a waste of time, money, and resources. Let me now explain our first argument. So, these procedures made by the EFSA are much easier to sustain for large companies than small business because of two main factors: the time and the data. So what happens is that the approval of the controls takes on average 1 year, because we have to remember that the motion clearly said that the controls are the one currently mandated, not others. So it takes on average 1 year, and in this time companies cannot sell their products. So for 1 year they have no income to cover expenses such as rent, salaries, and so on.
PY?
Yes.
In our model, we are talking about products that are already on the market. That means that this product will have to go through the assessment, and in the meanwhile, they already have margins of profit. But then either way, why does this matter more than safety?
Yes, I understand. No, you didn't understand, because the motion clearly states that we should go under the regulation that already are currently mandated, and these regulations clearly says that you can't put that product on the market until it's assessed. So moving on, a small business don't have enough money to reserves to cover for costs for such a long period, so they will fire their workers and going out of business. On the other hand, large companies will have the financial resources to do that, to handle these delays and costs. So that means that the competition is gone. There are only industrial companies that can sustain these controls, these delays in the money. Can you see where this is leading us? Let's see the impact of this. Small owners will not be able to make a living with food. There will not be any small owners or medium owners restaurants. There will be more industrial food on everyone's diet, because it will pass tests more easily than traditional food. So we all know and believe as a team that the democratic market, no thank you, should be always left open to many diverse competitors, as this is a proof of a free and dynamic society. This is Only this is a democratic market. So this leads us to our second argument. Most small and medium producers are pushed out of the market. The remaining companies will not able to instantly reorganize their production. So that means that they have to reorganize the supply chains so everything can be tracked down easily for the procedures and slow down production cycles. This means that they will sell less, so they will have lower profit. In a capitalist system, companies don't absorb rising costs, they compensate for it. So the impacts are that there is less food available because production slowdowns, and production are sold at higher prices. We have already seen this dynamic many times, but let's remember during COVID-19, the masks. So the demand grew and the supply could not keep up with the demand, so the prices got up and they weren't enough for everyone. So they became expensive and rarely accessible. So this is what this emotion would replicate in the food system. We are talking about sacrificing food accessibility to excessive regulations. We are talking about harming the same exact people the regulation claim to protect them. To sum up, we oppose the motion because it will lead to monopoly of the food market and it would harm the consumers more. Thank you.
Thank you. Your speech lasts 8 minutes and 32 seconds. Okay, we can go on with the second speaker from the proposition team.
Just a second, I will start my speech. Just a second.
When you want.
Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel. What you will be expecting in my speech, it will be first some rebuttals and then clarifications and framework, then moving on to our second and last argument about market fairness. So first of all, let's tackle the first issue that has been brought to us by opposition. They tell us that safety on their side and the health damage is reduced by them because of the research led on safety. But we, in our framework analysis, problem analysis, and in our argument, we have brought to you examples of how this is not actually ensured and how there is no benefit in the multinationals or companies in general industries in following such safety and some research. And that's all based in the cost benefit analysis. So we told you that when companies make decisions, they make it on a cost-based analysis. So let's just re-explain this for a second. We tell you that they do not comply with the regulations that they exist because they want to save money and because they want in a faster way enter in the market their products. And even if the products is not successful and they receive compliance, they still have time to get new products. And then we tell you that on the health problem, individuals they are the people that will then later on pay for the lack of the safety. And then the industries only pay the fine by the EU. However, it is probable that this, let's say, lack of regulations won't even be caught. But because people do not know about them, or when they lower their quality, but even if they are fined, it is not likely that this will happen due to the bureaucratic system, as we have told you, because it is slow, and when they're fined, it gets even slower. In the meanwhile, they still produce and sell. And then we tell you that in the status quo, literally, the companies gain more from not following the self-compliance rather in following it. So then opposition telling us that it is just about research about safety that on their side is ensured is only fake. And then we tell you that if there is no enforcement mechanism, so the probability is always lower that these are followed. And then about their main issue about about a food problem, on how food is following our proposition model about the production, how it gets slower, and because it gets slower, the demand grows and people can access to the food. We tell you that the products can't be sold after the verification, but the products are already in the market, so they're already being sold. This is ensured in the future, yes, but when we're talking about now, we're not actually tackling the problem that opposition brings to us. We tell you that the metrics of the debate should be based on how one side or the other can ensure to the protection and the fair market. And as we have shown you on our side, this is ensured because protection is, we can gain protection because the safety is ensured by literally undergoing the regulation on every kind of food. So not only novel food after 1997, but also the food before so that the food that have been going on before that. And then about the safety, about the fairness of the markets is what we're going to talk about in our second argument. Our second argument talks about the market's fairness, and the status quo structurally favors the multinationals and enables fraud, harming the small and medium enterprises. So our claim is that the current food safety system creates an unfair market in which large multinational companies can rationally out corners and absorb sanctions, as we have explained to you, while small and medium enterprises face disproportionate risk, requiring the EU-level pre-market safety assessment, restoring fair competition, and significantly reduces fraud. So what is the problem in the status quo? First of all, we have the enforcement costs are asymmetric across market actors. In the current system, a compliance and enforcement operates after products are in the market, and which affects firms directly depending on the size. So multinationals can absorb compliance failure because fines are marginally relevant to the turnover, the legal liability is diffused across the supply chains, and the reputational damage is mitigated through the marketing and the label diversification, as we have explained. This allows the lower prices, more addictive products, and the higher margins, even accounting for the occasional penalties. So hence, for multinationals, non-compliance is a business risk. But for the small and medium enterprises, face a radically different cost-benefit analysis. A single recall or sanction can be existential for them. Loss of trust often means permanent market exits. So therefore, for the small and medium enterprises, must overinvest in compliance, yet still complete on a price with firm that externalizes the risk. Under the current post-market system, we tell you that food is profitable and systematically undercuts the small and medium enterprises, requiring a pre-market EU assessment and removes fraud as a competitive strategy. Some examples that we bring you is first the honey adulteration with sugar syrup, including the organic labeled honey, and the effect of these are drastically lower product costs, and then the outcomes are that the fraudulent products can be sold at a lower price while maintaining the premium labels. Then we tell you that We have a second example by a mislabeling of the origin of the quality, especially for some brands, for example, Prosecco, Grana Padano, or Aceto Balsamico of Modena. And then in all of these cases, fraud reduces cost of the producers, A, then B, preserves or increases the market price, and C, directly undercuts the compliance producers. So why this disproportionality harms the small and medium enterprises? These fraud practices do not affect all actors equally, as we explained to you, because the small and medium enterprises and producers rely on basically authenticity and then traceability and the reputation based on the price premiums. When fraudulent products enter the market, consumers cannot distinguish real from fake. The prices fall across the category. So as a result, we have a compliance of the small and medium enterprises, the market share. Their higher production costs are no longer rewarded, and some are punished out of the market entirely. So meanwhile, the fraudulent actor has already captured the profit, often operates through the complex supply chains, and that can exist or rebrand when detected. This is fraud becomes a mechanism of marketing concentration, are not just deception. Why post-market enforcement cannot correct this distortion? Because opposition might argue that fraud is illegal already, so the authorities can push it. But under a post-market enforcement, we tell you that detection occurs after productions are sold. Then we tell you that damage and prices and trust have already happened. And then we tell you that sanction can come too late to protect the SMEs from the immediate losses. So mind you that in the 2024, the EU saw a record number of the potential olive oil fraud and mislabeling causes the first quarter of the year, driven by the inflation and the rising demand of the black markets. So even the fraud is punished, the compliance producers is not restored to the previous market position, the consumer's trust is slow to recover, and the market remains distorted. So how our proposition directly fixes this problem? We tell you that they require EU-level pre-market safety assessment for food to market the changes of the dynamic in two key ways. We tell you that upfront verifications in composition, origin claims, and the production process must be documented before sale. And then we tell you that fraudulent products are booked before they can undercut honest producers. And then we tell you that a higher available compliance cost, because fraud is no longer a try and see a strategy, so the cost of the deception is paid before market entry, not probability later. So this removes fraud as a viable competitive strategy and raises price signals that reward genuine quality. Thank you. I finished my speech.
Thank you. Your speech lasts 8 minutes and 28 seconds.
Everyone is ready? Everyone's ready? Okay. So, panel, as a second opposition, in my speech, I will first rebut what the opposition team has just brought, and then I explain you our third and last point. So, starting from the rebuttal, and from the last point, that's the second speaker has just brought, they said for about four minutes how actually labors and multinationals actually are damaging in the current market the small businesses. That's small businesses obviously have less money, and every cost they have is obviously very big for them, and even a higher increase of cost will cause inevitably some very major problem for the business. But then in their model, they highlights how actually these regulations are not free. This regulation needs to be paid, and they are forcing businesses to pay. Yes, they said that's obviously the fines will be scales in base of the how big the business is, but still it's obviously a big change, even especially for the smaller businesses. And it's also crucial because it will be inevitably reflects on consumers and price increases that will first, as already said by my first speaker, this will cause an increase in the cost of small businesses product that obviously will be good for multinational industrial product. And also second, because even more and more people can't afford healthy food, can't afford food made by a small product, but just by multinational. So obviously your point about the safety and preventing people from buying industrial food cannot stand. And moreover, they also talk a lot about labels, and actually labels are very strictly regulated in the EU. And in fact, you cannot put organic label or every premier label on a food and then hoping that's on a food that and said that your food is making in a premium level, and it's not, without be afraid of consequences of some checks by police or by some institution that cares about this. And in fact, if you can actually read on the papers people that you have brought, that means that someone has conduct some investigation, someone have discovered that premium level that you quotes were not just because of a premier system of making system, but just because some fraud to the customers. And in fact, probably that company had been fined, that company had been obviously processed, and wouldn't be that great for their business, and especially for the smaller businesses. So again, also because of labels, our customers are already protected and already knows what they are eating. So obviously everyone can just read the labels and understand if that food is healthy or not, and if it can harm their health or not. And if they cannot choose what food to buy in base of the label, probably because they are too poor to afford healthier food. So obviously having fines that will inevitably increase the cost of production, that's the cost for the customer, wouldn't be great, and will cause many people to just rely on industrial food that's again is unhealthy. And that's why we strongly believe that this regulation should not pass. Also, you also said during your whole first speech that you say that nowadays intervention is only after a consumption, and many people don't do this, but actually there are already some studies made on the diets, and I will expand on this in our third and last point. But if there are already some studies made on commonly consumed food, such as, I don't know, olive oil in the Mediterranean diet, or butter, for example, that means that food could be already considered safe, or they are most likely to be safe, and thus to pass the control, your control. And so it would be just a waste of money and time that would be crucial for small businesses, especially, and for the whole market to run out. And you also said that you want actually you also clearly said during your first speech that you want product not to be removed on the market, but you want to keep product on the market and just taste it all. But isn't like it's nowadays? I mean, still nowadays, actually, all the food currently on the market could be tested if anyone reports that food is not unhealthy, and someone you don't need the report, you just need to do some researches. No, thank you. So obviously you are just not solving anyone, you're just making you're just forcing people to buy your controls. That will be obviously an increasing fees for even for small businesses will be very great again. So will be a waste of resources, and that this led us to our third and last points. That is do about this. So in fact, we think that this regulation will be a waste of resources in terms of money and time. Why this? Because as already said, this regulation obviously have a cost in terms of money and time again, and obviously we are most likely to believe that each extra step will ask the same amount of money, but the diminishing returns will diminish because every time you analyze the same food, we'll discover less and less new things and new useful things. But the cost will be obviously the same, and the money spent will just increase and goes up. So we can see that if we focus too much on control everything that is on the market, we are just slowing it down because we are creating buyers for new ideas, and we are just asking everyone to pay fees that's for food they are already said because they hadn't been reported in the past 25 years or more. And if we do not maintain the status quo, millions of money will be spent, when you just waste this in these resources, and thus many businesses will probably die and fail because of this incredible expenses. And moreover, you have also to consider that, as already said, many studies, especially on the diet, has already been studied. For example, the Mediterranean diet have already been studied. So, for example, we say that olive oil is unhealthy. That product has already been studied, and we can certainly understand that if that product is still part of the Mediterranean Sea in the Mediterranean diet, and expertise nowadays all over the world still tell people that Mediterranean diet is good, which means that olive oil is obviously good and not unhealthy for the people. So what's the impact of this? Pretty straightforward. We are not ignoring food safety. We are just saying that if everyone just always goes on in a right way, and also that we could say dubious food has already been tested, will be just a waste of time and money, will cause many small businesses to fail just because, I don't know, some pointless researches. So please vote for opposition.
Thank you. Your speech lasted 8 minutes and 33 seconds.
Just let me know when everyone's ready, and then I'll begin my speech.
I'm ready.
Okay. So then, one key issue from side opposition, not understanding that the problems that we bring in the status quo are factual, real, and impact the people of the European Union. They cannot simply be ignored. In my speech, first of all, some framework clarifications, then the main clashes in this round and rebuttals. But let's start with that with two quick framework clarifications. First of all, on model. What is the counter model that they bring? Very vague counter model, not really flagged, but it's really just about research. They tell us, there is a lack of research, we're going to invest more. We don't really know where they get the money. We don't really know how this is useful to the issues that we bring. However, there are two ways we challenge it. The first one is exclusivity. We don't see why they're able to access this research and we're not. There's no true exclusivity to their counter model at all, whereas our counter model that I will clarify in a second is very much exclusive. But then second one, we spend the first 5 minutes of their first speech explaining why for multinationals especially, and since multinationals are the companies that are providing for the majority of our products, this is the most important stakeholder. For multinationals, it is now economically viable to not comply with the regulations. We tell you that the moment a company makes a choice, they need to value the costs and the benefits of that choice. In the status quo, so under side opposition, multinationals are thinking this way. They're telling us, look, if I don't comply with the regulations, I can cut costs because I can cut corners. I can use additives to make my products last longer. I can market them as better products than they actually are. I do not have to spend for all the data and the tests. And this is the benefit that they're acquiring. They're making money because they're cutting costs. The cost that they might have to pay is possibly having to face some fines. This is not enough for two key reasons. The first one is that there is no true enforcement mechanism. We tell you that the controls are very rare and they happen on a sample base. This means that most companies do not face controls ever. But then secondly, we tell you that for multinationals, the cost of the fines, even when they are applied, can be absorbed because they have several layers of supply chains and also because settlements are possible. Think about how Glovo just settled with the European Union, or how Deliveroo just settled with the European Union. Whenever there is a fine, the fine is paid years later. Settlements are possible, and they can talk about it so that the consequences are less weight less on the company. And so at the end of the day, the benefits of reducing costs and making more profit far outweigh the cost of a possible fine. But mind you that we bring all of this in first speech, explaining why there is a need for an enforcement mechanism. Insofar as side opposition never brings us an enforcement mechanism, they already lose on this point. But then, insofar as we not only want to provide logic, we also provide you with examples. And we tell you the issues that we're facing are real. We bring you 7 different examples throughout the first 2 speeches, explaining why in the status quo there are issues for consumer safety and for small and medium enterprises. But that I will take again in the clashes. Before I move on to the actual clashes, let me clarify our model, because in the second speech they try to squirrel it and they try to make it look something that is not. Do we change the status quo? Obviously. There is going to be a mandatory assessment for everyone. Every single company that wants to sell products will need to send the application to the European Union and send all of the data and the requirements that prove that their products are safe to be put on the market. In the status quo, this is not required of them, and this is why we have all of the safety hazards that I will tackle later. However, we never say that we're going to take the products off the market because A, this is simply impossible. The products are already on the market. And B, it wouldn't make sense. It would mean literally leaving the entire population of the European Union without products. You see how it doesn't make sense and it is simply illogical. But this is why we bring you a very, very specific model where we tell you we're going to test high-risk products first, like infant food that can put at risk babies. We're going to test staples like bread, like pasta, like oil, foods that is consumed on a daily basis. We'll put all of these products through the assessment and through the test, and then we'll test the less used products. Before I move on to the clashes, I will take a point, if you have one.
Yes, do you know that there is a special unit called NAS, Anti-Sophistication Unit, that already does control on these types of regulations?
Okay. The issue is that all of these tests are made, A, are not mandatory, and B, are very much obviously not enough. Why are they not enough? Safety clash, first point of rebuttal. What does side opposition tell us? They tell us that we don't even have an issue in the status quo with safety because regulation is already there. We bring you several different examples. We tell you that thousands of consumers bought infected eggs, horse meat sold as beef, seafood with additives, and in 2024, there were more than 200,000 cases of food intoxication based on the European Food Safety Authority. The moment we bring you this data, you cannot ignore the fact that in the status quo in Europe, there is an issue with safety when it comes to food. The only thing that they tell us is that the examples we bring are from 10 years ago. A, this is not true. We also bring examples that are from a couple of years ago max, but then B, insofar as you don't bring any logic as to why the status quo has changed, the examples still work, the issue is still there. They cannot be ignored. Mind you, you weigh this very, very highly because the impacts are scalable. First of all, there are issues on safety if the products are not safe, and this is the most intuitive impact. But then even when they are safe, it is not fair for consumers to not know what they are consuming. And unless you apply a mandatory requirement, that is not possible. But then when there are health hazards, there are higher health system costs, and there is lower trust in the European authority. So we tell you that the impacts are not only on the consumers, but it is entirely on the system. And this is exclusive. The only side that can solve this issue is us. Last minute and a half on small and medium enterprises, the second most important stakeholder. They tell us that the main issue is that small and medium enterprises do not have access to data and time. First of all, this is already not justified. It is never explained why multinationals have access to data and small and medium enterprises do not. But then secondly, this exactly proves our point. Mind you that in the status quo, as we say in first speech, all food that is present on the market should comply with regulations. In order to comply with the regulations, you should have the data that assesses that your food is safe. If you're not able to provide this data, that means that you're not complying with the regulations. That means that you prove our first clash and that there is a safety issue in the status quo. But then let me tell you what actually happens to small and medium enterprises in the status quo, as we prove in the second speech. They face unfair competitions because multinationals can bear the cost of fines. They cannot. So then small and medium enterprises have to comply with the regulations. Multinationals have not. They face advantages in the market. And so therefore, small and medium enterprises cannot compete with them. We solve the issue the moment we make everyone comply with the regulations, and the moment we have everyone and respect, it's the 8th minute, and respect the regulations. At the end of the round, you value safety over everything, because in the moment the European Union is the place in the world with the strictest regulations, it is very clear that the European population values safety over everything. You value it over innovation. They never prove why it's important. Thank you.
Thank you too. Your speech lasted 8 minutes and 19 seconds.
Can everybody hear me now?
I think that everybody can hear you. So just 1 second, please.
Just tell me when everybody's ready.
Okay, I think that you can go when you want.
My speech starts in 3, 2, 1. Panel, first of all, in this debate as a third speaker, it is my duty to clear a huge misunderstanding that there has been and a huge squirreling that is being brought forward for this whole debate by side proposition. Now, the motion, and I'll do this, and then we move on to the points of rebuttal and the one clash point that I'll use for this third speech. Now, the huge mistake that side proposition does in bringing us their model is that the motion clearly says that this house would require all foods already on the market to undergo the European safety assessment currently mandated for novel foods. This means that it's completely unfair for side proposition to give us a new model that does not work like the laws that are currently in place. And why is this important to the midst of this debate? Because our major impact happens exactly if we follow the current laws. And what I mean by this is that the people and the small vendors that have their foods that are currently taken away from the market are not able to produce them, and they're not able to sell them. They're going to starve in that meantime because they literally cannot pay rent. They cannot earn anything because it is their duty. And this is justified by the fact that the current European laws, what they state is when a novel food is introduced into the market, you must first study it, and then, and only then, no, thank you, and only then can it be introduced into the market. And if you think about this, it's logical. Why would a new food not be studied if we think it can possibly be hazardous and we just leave it on the market? That's not how it works, and that's the huge flaw that team proposition is committing here. All foods, when they start being studied, we're not telling you that all foods are going, no, thank you. We're not telling you that all foods are going to just be taken away from the market the moment the regulation passes. But when the study is started for a specific food, then the food must be taken off the market until the study is completed, especially if we believe that there is a potential hazard in this food, or else then it literally makes no sense to even study the food. Because think about this, if we believe that the food is hazardous, then we should take it off the market until we have the study that proves that the food is not hazardous. But if we do not believe that the food is hazardous, then why are we even studying the food in the first place? There's literally no reason to do this. And on top of that, let me just now respond to something that the third speaker proposition brings in the last few minutes of her speech. Now, she claims that we don't explain why multinationals have access to data and small vendors don't have it, and that proves their point. Now, let me explain why it doesn't. First of all, multinationals have the access to the data because they mostly sell their foods in supermarket and they're mandated to have the label under the food. So I think we all know that if we go to a supermarket, we're going to find the nutritional values over the food on the backside of the packaging. And if we go to a traditional vendor, say we're going to a random pet store that's offering us some traditional cheese, obviously it's not going to give us the specific food values for that. But and here's why it doesn't prove their point. No, thank you. Here's why it doesn't prove their point specifically is they claim that if we have no data, then it's unsafe. But we tell you that studies on diets, especially the European, the Mediterranean diet, have already been done, and there's been shown to be likely no side effects from the whole from the diet as a whole. So if the Mediterranean diet consists of lots of food, and say no, thank you, we take it as an example, say olive oil. Then if on the whole diet olive oil is also consumed, and the whole diet has no negative effects, then by that we can conclude that olive oil has no negative effects in itself, without having the specific data that comes from olive oil. And because we already have these studies, and these studies are sufficient because diets all over the world are studied for decades now, then we can conclude that most of the foods that we even don't have data on are still going to be safe, especially the ones, just a second, especially the ones that we get from small vendors. Which means that if team proposition were to actually debate this debate fairly and use the current EU regulations, then we would face a major economical drawback on their side for the small vendors, which would literally go out of business when the studies are being done. Yes, go ahead.
Are you aware of the fact that the olive oil being good has nothing to do with the way it's being processed by a company being good? And B, that the pastor should comply with the regulations too. So if they don't have access to the data, they're not complying, they're representing a safety hazard.
Thank you. Now, first of all, the regulations that are currently on the market that we base our claim on, which foods are not hazardous, they don't tell us that they should need the data. I've just explained this. If the diet as a whole is safe, then we can conclude that food is safe even without having data. So that is not an issue. But now on the point of producing, what we tell you is that it's not necessary that so many food additives are going to cause such a major health impact. This brings me to the first clash point of the debate to respond to your point, which is the cost-based analysis. It is crucial for me to rebut this because the whole case of team proposition is based on the cost-based analysis. Now, what they base this on is on the assumption that companies willingly exploit these issues and these flaws in the laws for profit. But what we tell you is that if companies were smart, were actually thinking about this, then we would not have seen what all of the cases that they bring to us as example. We can think of the 2013 meat scandal. If the companies knew and purposefully went ahead and put these products on the market, then they could have also predicted, because they knew supposedly what was in the food, they could have also predicted the huge public opinion backlash that came after, no thank you, that came after the scandal. And it is just disingenuous for side proposition to think that after, say, the cow meat scandal of 2013, companies faced no actual backlash at all, they just had to pay fines. We must remember, and they just ignore this, public opinion exists in 2025. And this means that if their analysis of the status quo is actually true, then such things such as the meat cow scandal would not have happened, because companies would have known that the cost-based analysis in that specific case would have been to not put the food on the market due to the enormous public scandal that occurred after. This means that companies likely do not follow this approach that side proposition is claiming. But even if you don't buy this, what I tell you that after we've done with these huge scandals on the same clash point, we tell you that these smaller foods, the foods that that don't have this much additives, this negative effects, they do not have an actual impact. Now, just tell me, out of all the examples that they've used, they talked about grana padano cheese and all the stuff, how many people have actually gotten sick during the last few years eating grana padano cheese because it was infected? We believe there's been basically none, and that is because companies do not follow this because it is not cost convenient to them. Just think about this: how much convenient can it be for a company to just save a couple of cents on the selling of their product because they managed to use an additive that makes it last like a month longer, in comparison to paying the huge fines that need to go to the EU? Which, on top of that, as we get more scandals and time goes on, public awareness is going to be raised, and it's going to be then improve the situation. Companies are going to face even more scandal as they push these things further. Public opinion will not stand for this.
Why?
Has not stand. No, thank you. Has not standed for this throughout all of the last years. Then why should we do it now? And then what we tell you now is just disregard all things I've said now in my speech. We still win on impact weighing, and this is because if they tell us that, as we understand from the speech, most foods are going to pass, then we've effectively used a large, incredible amount of resources for literally no outcome. As I've claimed, studies are already being done on diets. We have the sufficient data to then understand what these issues are and if they are actually dangerous. And then if as a whole diet there's so negative, then what should it be for a single, right? I've talked about this, which means that all of this analysis that's been done by said proposition then comes out to being useless. But the negative impacts that we have on their side are as follow. First of all, we spent a bunch of resources for nothing, but this is not a major negative impact on their side. We have the small businesses are going to cost because of the 1 year delay on selling. You say the study takes on average 1 year, then a company cannot sustain this. A small producer, a traditional farmer cannot sustain this. If we actually interpret things as the motion wants us to interpret it, we cannot just accept propositions squirreling it this way. But then on top of that, they just completely disregard at some point, and now I'm going to bring it back. The point on supply decrease and demand being the same, like we've talked about in the first speech. What we have as an inevitable impact of this is that food is going to cost more. And if you couple this with the economic impact that comes from the small vendors not being able to sell their foods as well, we're just going to have a full-on scale recession. And on top of that, it's even worse because we're going to have a full-on scale recession by something that we willingly approved. It's not something that came from external factors such as the house crisis. It's something that we internally approved and thought was good. And then we as the European Union are failing our own citizens because we're making them pay more for goods and for their foods. And so, literally, this is why we win the debate just on impacts, even if you disregard all my rebuttal or my questions, because these safety issues that team proposition is bringing are being inherently exaggerated by them, and companies are not actually following the analysis they give you, because if they were, we would not have seen scandals such as the cow meat scandal. That is why on impacts we win this debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Your speech lasted 8 minutes and 16 seconds.
I'm ready.
Okay, perfect. So, as you know, we have finished the constructive part of our debate, and now we are moving on the reply speech, starting again from the opposition team, when you want.
So, if I were to go to a doctor, would it prescribe me the same medical test that it prescribes a critical ill patient? No, it doesn't. And now, in my speech, I'm going to explain why. So, panel, let me guide you through this debate to show us who clearly won and who clearly understood and read the motion. So, first of all, the proposition team absolutely decided to ignore the motion and bring us a new model, which was not obviously fair for our for this debate. In this model, they said that they value the safety of the consumers, obviously, because there are not enough controls. They said the controls are rare. This is obviously not true, as we said. Controls are mandatory for foods to be put on the market. The labels are correct. you can't put special ingredients. So that already has been debated. Then they sustained throughout all the speeches that it would bring an unfair competition, and we absolutely agree with you. So they said that the small businesses would be very affected and very disadvantaged by the fines of the controls. So first of all, with the model, they don't solve the problem as we rebuttal, and then the unfair competition just grows, as we said in our arguments, because of the monopoly of the market, because it's way easier for multinationals to sustain the costs. Then they don't value the time, the research, the scientists, the everything, the money that should be used for these controls. Can we imagine all the foods that are on the market to be under all the same controls? It's an enormous effort which is useless, as we said in our team line. So for us, it seems like they fear some foods that have been eaten safely for centuries for absolutely no reason. And just that they said also that companies profit on fraud, but that is not correct. Yes, industrial food is not safe because it has a lot of additives, but the additives are on the label, as we said. And so obviously this is not fraud, we just need to acknowledge it. But let's talk about our world. So in our world, we believe in fairness. We believe in fairness of the economic market, of fairness of small and big multinational and diverse competitors. We believe in innovation, in science, in research, in preventing problems, not just doing things that are controls on things that are already on the market, which are going to be made for centuries. Are we really thinking that we should put the same controls on foods instead of treating our real problems, as we said, regarding innovation and science? Thank you.
Thank you. Your speech lasts 4 minutes and 2 seconds. Okay.
When you're ready, Pano, I can start.
Okay. So we can now finish our debate with the last speech from the proposition team.
Okay. I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, before starting with our last reply, we tell you that we never squirrel the motion. Our model was needed to explain how we apply it to the foods already in the market. The regulation is exactly the same. Please, panel, note that. Real changes come from our side, proposition side, the only side that actually ensures safety, the only side that actually achieves the impact on the people that have been completely ignored by the opposition side. And the strategic mistakes that the first opposition makes in not tackling the most important stakeholders, being people and their safety. We tell you that proposition clearly wins because of how opposition never tackles the problem and how never explains to us how they're going to actually solve the problem instead of mitigating them. So let's move on to the clashes that proposition has clearly win. Let's start with the most important clash of today. We tell you safety. While on the other side, opposition tells us that safety just comes from research, people have been consuming the products, so there's no problem in consuming them, and how the regulations would be a waste of resources. We tell you that as proposition, in our third speech, we tell you that how the exclusivity of their research is not achieved only by them, and how the multinationals won't even comply with the regulations. And then we tell you that the enforcement from their side in achieving safety, there's actually no enforcement. So there's no actual impacts that are being brought to us by side opposition. The safety clash, it's won clearly by a proposition side because of the example that we bring you, because of the harm that we show you that it is in the stakeholders. The food intoxications, for example. And these are all examples and things that have been not tackled by opposition side. And they say that the status quo just changes, but they never show us how. So the first clash clearly is win by opposition because of the impacts and the exclusivity of the safety that we can achieve by imposing the regulations on all kinds of food. Then we tell you that moving on to the safety, to the market fairness and the let's say impacts on the small and medium enterprises, and then to the multinationals, while opposition tries to tackle the fact that by imposing regulations you make them pay, make the SMEs pay more, and so there is no actual good outcome for them, and how then also the products won't be available and they only will lose income. We tell you that on our side everybody will comply, everywhere will comply with the regulations, and we tell you that in the status quo, a problem that has been never tackled by opposition is the fact that only multinationals do not comply with the regulations, due to the fact that they can do that based on the cost-benefit analysis that we have brought to you. While opposition tell us that they can let's say outcome from the benefit the cost-benefit analysis, because the multinationals do not have any incentives in actually getting it, actually comply with it. We tell you that, and our point is that the 99% of the companies do not even get discovered. And then we tell you that in the status quo, so because there are no enforcements, we tell you that in these cases, even in the small percentage of the cases that have been discovered are enough to make us win, because of the huge impacts that these companies, the huge impact that these companies have on the safety and the healthy of people. So we clearly win the market fairness example, because we tell you that their logic is simply not stable, and our model puts also the impacts on the market fairness first. And lastly, we tell you that innovation is our last clash. There's no exclusivity on their side. They never explain why we care about it and why it's important for the EU citizens and household safety. So with saying that, we tell panel, we have quite clear that proposition has win. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Your speech has lasted 4 minutes. So we know that our debate has come to an end. I congratulate you all for your performance and interest debate, and I invite you to clap our hands. So now the panel is moving to the adjudicator room, and we will come back as soon as possible.